Okay, good day, everyone. Welcome to the Social Impact Revolution podcast. My name is Harold Graham. I'm the CEO of Social Impact Investment. It's a platform that marries blockchain technology with ESG reporting. Today, our guest is Vincent Catalano, CFA. He is with Stuyvesant Capital Management, and we're going to have a discussion today about projects he's involved in, and then we're going to transition into a conversation about ESG, where we think ESG is going. And I'll get things started just about handing things off to Vincent. Vincent, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on right now with you in Stuyvesant Capital Management? And also, let's talk about some stuff that you're doing that you're really excited about. Really looking forward to it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Harold, and thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I very much look forward to it. Stuyvesant Capital Management has been around since 1978, co-founded by a gentleman by the name of John Cooper, and it's involved with what we call value squared or value within value investing, which basically takes a look at the macro strategy and then determines which areas look like they're most attractive from a value perspective, and then within that, looking for the individual values that are more favorable within each one of those sectors. So that's where we come up with the value within value or value squared as an approach.
Would it be fair to ask if that's more of, is it like your own version of a quant fund?
Not exactly, because this is all fundamental analysis.
Got it. Okay.
John is a CFA, as am I, and John's approach has been, well, let's contrast this with traditional value investing, okay?
Sure.
A Bill Miller, a Warren Buffett, etc. Traditional value investing would be bottom-up approach, okay? Where you're looking at individual companies, but there's not really much of a emphasis or regard for the larger, bigger macro picture. Our approach, John's approach, has been to look at the macro picture first, identify where the more attractive areas are from a value perspective using a range of metrics. And then once they have been identified, to then look for the individual areas, the individual industries and companies within them that look like they afford the best opportunities. So you do that value investing part second, the traditional value investing part. First, you identify the sectors that look good. Then you find the ones within the sectors that look the most attractive. And logical, makes perfect sense to do it that way. So that's what Stuyvesant Capital Management is. And my role as chief market strategist is to do things like this and to discuss the strategy that John has developed. We also have a couple of other things going on right now with some projects that we'll see if they come to pass in regards to an investment market timing approach, because you can have great strategies from a longer term perspective, but if you're not aware of or sensitive to the market timing aspect of it, which really deals with what some would call technical analysis, okay? And so we have a firm that we're affiliated with, Market Trends Global, in which they do very good market signaling, is the phrase that they prefer to use. So that's the focus there. So, okay, we have the strategy, looks great, looks attractive. When do we get in? When do we get out? How much do we overweight? How much do we underweight? Not just from a fundamental perspective, but from a markets perspective as well. So that's the blend of the two, and that's a project that we're working on right now, which have me back in a couple of months, and then I'll let you know if we have this launch.
Absolutely will, without a doubt. So that sounds actually really interesting. I mean, so you're still in the research stage on that?
Actually, we're a little bit beyond that. We're like this close to launch, working with another company, a company on the West Coast that has to do with I can't use the phrase because then one would get a hint as to what the company's actual name is.
That's okay. So, we don't want to ruin anybody's proprietaries at this moment.
Exactly.
But I promise we'll definitely have you back to talk about this once it launches, for sure. And I'd love to help in any way I can. That sounds like a fantastic project. Now,
Okay.
you mentioned earlier before we got on the podcast that you're involved in something in regards to fintech, and that you're
Yes.
involved with a think tank down in Washington D.C.
Sure.
And I'd love to hear about that. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. Definitely, and it's relevant to ESG.
Excellent.
Okay. And frankly, from the work that you're doing, everything that's happening on the fintech or digital side is relevant to ESG. So
Certainly.
there's a really good a connection and a mesh there. The think tank is long name, Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, ITIF for short.
Got it.
Okay. And if anybody's interested, they can go itif.org and they'll see information about what ITIF does. Founded by Rob Atkinson, who came originally from the center left think tank called Progressive Policy Institute.
Okay.
And ITIF is focused on trends, disruptive trends that are happening from a technology point of view. They are a
The
true,
blockchain is definitely a part of that.
that's right, exactly. And they are a true think tank, a 501c3. They're not a 501c6. They're not a lobbying firm. And so what they do is they do research work and they communicate that information to public policy experts.
Got
That's their mission. And that's traditional think tank type stuff, as opposed to, let's say, a McKinsey and Company, which would be a think tank of a different sort, but their work is directed toward the corporate world and even to some extent the investment world.
Certainly.
Well, I've been affiliated with ITIF for about 12 years now.
Wow.
I
Okay.
am a non-resident senior fellow, which sounds very prestigious, but it's actually there. I'm there to help out to spread the word of ITIF. But I will be going down next week to meet with Rob and to talk with some other people in regards to a consultancy idea that I have that perhaps ITIF might want to associate itself with. And it
Sure.
has to do with fintech. And the main purpose of this is if we have a think tank that provides information for public policy people, and what public policy decisions that are being made are important, okay, to everyone. Well, this information flow of going from the think tank to public policy is a one-way street. What if we had within that the capability of going outward to a particular community, in this case, the financial services community, not from a lobbying point of view or anything like that, but strictly from an information point of view? What if you use that think tank capability and analysis and provide this two-way flow of information from the public policy people to the companies in the financial services field, and from the financial services field to the public policy people? Because the public policy people, not only do they want the money, okay, and donations from financial services firms, but they also would benefit from the information and the knowledge that financial services firms have, their perspective, the so-called CFA perspective, if we can use that as a phrase, that perspective on the investment community, the investment world, on the economic environment, and on the political part of it. Now, what makes this really, really interesting is if you think about the three power centers of America, they are finance, let's say is Wall Street writ large,
Sure.
okay? It is technology, Silicon Valley writ large, okay? And then politics, society, which is
Okay.
DC, Washington, government writ large. And
Got
that's concentrated all in this one area. And I believe through this think tank and the development of this consultancy within. So we'll find out. It sounds like an interesting project that I think has quite a bit of promise, and it looks like an area that I think would be beneficial to
So
everyone
you're
involved.
you're looking to take the computing power, let's just say, of the think tank and decentralize it, if you will, and spread it across the entire market so that, well, in this case, anyone involved in financial services could have access to this level of
That is
um,
correct.
intense research and scrutiny.
That is correct. two elements to this. One, many in the Wall Street community tend to think of research as being proprietary unto what they do.
Oh,
Okay.
certainly.
Now, if you look at what organizations like McKinsey, Ernst and Young, and others do, that's research. If you look at what think tanks like ITIF do,
Sure.
that's research. Now, granted, that information is flowing in a particular direction. Well, what if you had this free exchange flowing back and forth? What if you had the knowledge and information of the financial markets, the message of the markets, and you incorporated that into the flow to public policy, even to corporations, but we're going to focus on public policy. And what if the public policy information were flowing to the financial community? Now, many
Vincent,
large
I
financial,
think what would be helpful is if you gave a use case scenario, just a very simple use case scenario. I, think of a
yeah,
community of financial services folks who would want to take advantage of this, and what the potential outcome would be with
okay,
and without the think tank.
okay. You're cutting to the heart of the issue of what this is really about. Okay, you're an RIA, you're a wealth manager, and you're running billions. Okay, you don't have any DC connections. Okay,
Okay.
maybe you join a group or whatever, and you get, but it's a lobbying thing and all of that type of stuff, which is
Sure.
not what we're talking about. All right, but you want to know what's going on. You want to be able to, maybe, if you want to, through direct relationships, have conversations and educate. You want to call that lobbying? Okay, fine. But
Well,
if you
ultimately,
want to
as an
talk,
RIA, part of your job is to pivot when the
yeah,
market pivots, and sometimes the market pivots because of legislation, and other
that's right.
times market pivots because I can think of 1,000 reasons. But
Sure.
I get where you're going with this
Regulation.
one, please.
Yeah. Regulation is an issue, which, by the way,
Certainly.
ties directly into things related to DeFi and blockchain and fintech and everything else with that. Well, okay. So now what you have is you have these three these three elements, these three power elements, all right, which is finance, technology, and let's call it regulation for the moment, but
Sure.
it's political, societal, that type of thing. Well, all of that stuff seems to be compressed into fintech, okay? And if you're in the financial services business and you're not being sensitive to that noise that you hear in the other room called
Mm,
fintech, okay, which is not just about a bunch of cool apps,
no, no,
okay?
for sure.
It's not just about, Venmo and I can send money or I can now buy crypto and stuff like that. It's much more than that. That is, fintech is to RIAs, to wealth managers, and the like in the financial services industry, an existential threat to what you do because fintech offers opportunities to investors that directly go to the heart of whatever it is that you do. Now, a simplified version of this would be something like robo investing. But if you think
Yes.
about where this goes, it becomes much more sophisticated, much more involved, and the ability to do things, especially with a lot of innovation that's going on from firms like the ETF providers. They're doing a whole range of fascinating things. If I can just mention, I watched a webinar yesterday in which Admiral, what's his name? Michael Rogers. Admiral Michael Rogers is affiliated with a group called Team 8. Team 8 is doing research work in conjunction with Wisdom Tree, in which they've come up with a cyber security ETF. Think about that for a moment, the implications of that.
Sure.
Affiliations of ETF firms with really, in effect, almost like a think tank, okay, the consultancy, developing work to come up with customized ETFs. Now, that's just one example. That's a many respects a fintech type of solution, or certainly the application can be done through fintech operations, and I'm sure organizations like
Well, if we're
Venmo, which
using cybersecurity as a filter, right, for that particular group, right,
right,
then
yeah,
any filter could be put on it. It could be an
Absolutely.
ESG filter. It could
ESG,
be
exactly.
it could be a profitability filter. It could be just about anything.
Just about anything. Healthcare.
Sure, exactly. Well, and even healthcare to a certain standard. I mean,
Exactly.
you could lay
Exactly.
on as many factors as you wanted to in your analysis
Right.
when you've got that much computing power. I'm saying,
That's right.
with that many eyes on it who have
Okay.
that much experience in that particular sector.
Yes.
So what you're talking about is kind of like assembling a supercomputer of people who are going to review, any number of factors in regards to investment decisions, right?
Yes. And it's not just, okay, let's
That's
look at what
exciting.
indexes. You're creating customized indexes or indices.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like
But
robotic traders are great, uh, to a certain extent, but obviously the human factor
yeah.
is always going to be a better thing. You know, Factory floors to the highest levels of what you can use AI for. I think that the human factor is always going to be necessary, in my opinion.
hmm
I mean, otherwise we're going to end up with more flash crashes, uh,
Right.
because
But
everybody's AI was set to sell at a certain point, and it just started a cascade, and you know,
right.
the
That's right.
the stock
And that
prices went
becomes
down to zero for nothing, and
right.
it took until everybody realized, hey, wait, we didn't mean to sell that. Whoops. I mean, anyway,
Right.
I'm
Right.
sorry, I'm
Yeah. No.
waxing
No.
off on another subject
That's correct.
that's not
Yeah. uh,
pertinent for this.
Yeah. The fintech is an existential threat, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for financial service firms, those that are below the mega uh,
Sure.
companies, or below that mid and smaller companies, those are hedge funds, private equity firms, all looking for an edge, that type of thing. And understanding what fintech means, both in terms of a threat, but also in an opportunity, is what the focus of this project would be. So we'll see how that develops. But
Okay,
you
so
have,
the focus of this podcast is around ESG
right,
investing, and so you've really clicked on something important in that the fact that fintech is actually a really big part of ESG, and ultimately um, what kind of technology you're connecting your company with
yes,
uh, is ultimately going to be a part of ESG ratings or measurements, however you want to put it.
sure.
But I have a feeling also, down the road, it's also going to be a part of regulation. But the point I'm making is that I think that with your experience, I'm wondering what you see in regards to next steps for ESG and next steps for fintech as it relates to ESG.
Okay. As it relates to ESG, the area that the broader area that I would always keep in mind is that it has to do with climate.
Okay,
Okay. All right. We know that there's a need for this. We know that there's an economic need for it. We know that there's a societal need for it. And if the climate continues to go awry, okay, and we don't do anything about it, then there's going to be lots and lots and lots of problems on a whole range of levels.
certainly.
So if I weren't doing the tech stuff, I would be doing what you're doing. Okay, which is focusing in on that and climate related issues. Within that area, the one that I think gets a little bit less of an appreciation, okay, deals with water and the work that water.org is doing. For
Okay.
example, the Matt Damon affiliate, the actor Matt
Yes,
Damon
yes. I'm
affiliated
familiar
with
with the organization.
yeah, that is just that's a field that if you don't know much about it, you really should. You really should understand because clean water isn't just drinking water, it's wastewater. It's for industry. I mean, you know much more about this than I do. And so that's an area where clients that we have money invested in through ETFs primarily. But it's that's one key area that that
Now,
I
is this
find
an area that you are pitching in regards to your think tank? So,
no,
you'd have a specific group that would focus on water and
no.
how to invest across that
No,
industry?
no, no. The think tank would be concentrated within the whole fintech area. Okay,
Gotcha. Okay, I'm
so
sorry.
this is not a fintech item. The one thing
Got it.
that relates to the stuff that's going on with fintech, with the project that I have in mind for the think tank, is one of my meetings next week is with a few people from the Blockchain Association, which
Oh,
is
right.
an
Okay.
area that you exactly. It's right up the area of the work that you do. So, I mean, I agree with you that blockchain is central to all of this, and that you really have to understand the implications of what blockchain means, what it
Yeah. If
means
I
for
may,
yeah,
for us, and excuse me for interrupting,
no, no,
but
sure.
for us, blockchain really, I wasn't all that familiar with it until it became obvious that ES&G was going to actually make its way into the market,
Hmm.
and we needed a way to provide transparency. We needed a way to provide reporting where um, not only would the general counsels at these larger companies approve
Hmm.
of putting documentation out to the public, but it would require the level of security that those folks would have to be satiated in order to enter the market with it, right? So that was one of the
Understood.
first items, and blockchain clearly covers that.
Right.
It's almost unhackable. I say almost. Yes, I believe there was a couple of people who had their accounts hacked or their Bitcoin stolen, but they're so far and few between, and it's such a difficult thing to do. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know the specific stories. I'm not going to quote those, but the bottom line is it's almost unhackable because
Right.
of the amount of characters in the key, the digital key that you're given in order to access files on the system. So that was the first piece, and then the second piece was the accountability, which is ultimately once you put something on the blockchain, it can't be changed, it can't be altered, it can't be viewed without there being a record of this is what it looked like before the change, this is
Hmm.
what it looked like after the change, this is who made the change, and these are all the people that have looked at it.
Understood.
And so, I mean, I feel like that level of transparency was what this needed. And so I'm hopeful that the regulators will see this as an opportunity to put this into the marketplace, whether it's my company or another company or whoever does it. This is not about taking credit or being the first one to do it. This
Hmm.
is really about just making sure that ES&G survives, that we continue this encouragement of investors to invest in companies that are doing the right thing, that are trying to make the world a better place, or even do business in a better way, a more transparent, a more clear way than they used to
Hmm.
be.
Hmm.
Any incremental change is good, in my opinion. I'm not one of these zealots that says, well, unless we can eliminate all of this or all of that, the whole thing's garbage. I would much rather see an incremental reduction in slave labor than something that's a nuclear
Understood.
bomb, and
Right.
yeah, we don't have slave labor anymore, but now we don't have this entire sector of business anymore, and
Right.
there more suffering has come about it from it than the suffering that was
Benefit.
occurring under
Hmm.
the previous administration.
Right.
So
Understood.
the point I'm making is I believe that if we can get some folks to adopt this and really bring it forward, that it would cement this movement in time, and
Hmm.
ultimately we would guarantee the future or the sustainability of the liquidity that's being brought to the market. So that's kind of where
Sure.
I stand on the whole thing.
For sure. Blockchain application is in many, many different ways in many different areas. It's not just about Bitcoin. Okay.
Oh yeah.
You're showing, an example of it, and yeah, it's going to be there. So,
Yeah, Vincent, we were talking on yesterday's podcast about how most folks, at least the folks that I've been experienced with, I'm just going to speak anecdotally on this, but most folks don't really understand the difference between communism and socialism. And so when they see something they don't understand, they slap the worst label they can think of on it. And so that's
mhm,
why we hear a lot of people yelling about communism, even though that's not even remotely what has been proposed by anyone in our government.
right,
So
right, understood.
it's the
I
same situation with
understood. Yeah.
blockchain, where the minute you say blockchain, you're one of these Bitcoin guys, or you're trying to push some digital currency, And that's got absolutely nothing to do with my company or what we're doing. We have no plans to ever put forward a digital currency.
Right.
We're just using it as a basis of storage because we believe in, the accountability items that I just mentioned, and we believe it'll provide the transparency that'll generate more liquidity. That's all we're trying to do.
Sure. And in time, that learning curve will enable people to understand what it means and not with the application of it to, a crypto or anything of that sort. And to give a little historical perspective, it's now 1994, 1995, and I'm on the board of the New York Society of Security Analysts, which is now known as CFA Society New York. And I'm giving a presentation along with another fellow in regards to something that we should do at the New York Society. And I said, what we need to do is to create a website. And the first comment was, what's a website? Okay. So now it's, 2021 and, blockchain. No, give it time and the learning curve will be there and they'll understand, the implications of it. So,
Reminds me of the time before the dot-com bubble where investors were going so crazy that anyone with $1 was throwing it at any company that was supposedly on the World Wide Web. Your company's on the World Wide Web? Where do I invest?
All right. Exactly. So, the blockchain is a killer app, and it's going to have implications wide and far. And in the ESG area, you're describing it really, really well. Good stuff. Good.
Thank you. Before we close, just would love to get your idea of where you think this whole ESG thing is going, the good and the bad.
I think it's primarily headed all in the important right direction, not fast enough.
Okay.
And that's because what you have is you need government involved, you need states involved. It's borderless when it comes to just like money. The environment is borderless. So what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. It flows right on out. It goes and so and therein lies the rub, because what you have is different political systems, different economic systems, different agendas, different value propositions, and it becomes problematic. And even things like the Paris Accord, which is a step in the right direction, gets all tangled up in politics, etc. And it's can't move fast enough. It's essential, and it is becoming existential to life on Earth. So all things related to it, it's key. To use the example that was given before, it's the frog in boiling water. Okay, you're slowly turning up the heat. The frog is staying there. He's not jumping out. Okay, and there comes a point at which that frog gets severely damaged, and that's the situation that we're in. So it's essential. It's necessary. I think now some of the investments are now starting to become recognized as being important. And so for investors, the ETFs that focus on it, the individual companies that do, if you can find the right ones to do this with, is critical. It's mission critical. So you got to know what's happening with it, and you got to hope that it keeps developing, regardless of what the political ranting and ravings might be. And some of them are legitimate. They are legitimate. Power to government is something that always needs to be modified. And society, both of these things need to be, it's what the book, The Narrow Corridor, describes as that narrow corridor where liberty takes place, but all kinds of good things happen. And what you need to have what they call the shackle leviathan, which is the state, and you need an active society and the blend of the two. Now take that and imagine that you're not just dealing with that with one country, and you're dealing with all countries, and you're dealing with them with different systems, not having that necessarily that balance that's there. It's an issue. It's not going to be an easy go. It's not going to be an easy
We've
go, but critical and needed.
we've reached the 30-minute mark, and so that's going to be where we're going to stop things. I guess the last thing I'll say is that I completely agree with everything you just said in regards to it's going to require vigilance from everyone in the system. This is blockchain's a great application, like you said, but it's certainly not a be all end all answer that will do everything for us and that no one has to be involved. I mean, if there's no eyes on these companies and what they're reporting and no one calling them out for lying, they're going to do business as usual. I mean, there's already a term for that called greenwashing. I mean, they've been saying, oh yeah, we're lowering our carbon emissions, but then when the watchdogs go behind and check things out, no, you're actually not. In fact, some companies have actually increased. But so I'm agreeing with you 100% on the, it's a democratic movement. And so it's going to require everyone's participation. And so the more people that we can bring to the show, the better. And anyway, I want to thank you so very much for your time today, Vincent. Your insights were excellent. I can't wait to post this onto our website. I'll send you a link when it's over. But again, Vincent, I appreciate your time, and we're going to end things here.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Okay.